That's making headlines across board. It's been given a huge space on the top page of the Nation. Man under pressure, Waititu's moment of reckoning. Wanted in a corruption investigation, Kiambu governor surrenders to police as politicians from Kieleweke faction, sensing an opportunity to draw blood, tell him to pack his bags and leave. And there's more information on page 6 of the Standard, while also on page 5 and the top page of the page 6 of the Nation, but also on the Standard on the top page and page 5, Waititu's big fight to remain in office. Now, we're being told further that last week ruling by High Court that governors charged with economic crimes of vacate office might spell doom for Kiambu boss and others being probed. And this is also the basis of our Twitter poll question. We asked you, do you feel that those government officials who are caught in corruption cases stay out of office during the duration of their trial? And we'd like your opinions on that. But of course, for now, I'd like the opinion of my panelists. I'll start with you, Gwanda. What do you feel about this one?
On Waititu, I think he has to get good lawyers to represent him. He has to prove that he did not collude into this fiasco of tenderpreneur. He has to also prove that he did not benefit from the proceeds.
Him and his family.
Of 588 million.
Yeah.
And he also, it's in a bad situation because it's actually in the cells, in EFCC cells with his wife as well. And you don't want that to happen. You know, men get arrested, women get arrested here and there, but it becomes a little bit grave when you and a family, and I'm really happy that at least the DPP said, well, the daughter doesn't seem to have been, you know, an active director in this company. And for that reason, they got the wife and Waititu himself. He's got to prove himself in court. As to whether this guy needs to step down or not, I strongly believe that he needs to step down. If we're going to uphold Chapter 6 into action in this country.
Absolutely. Honorable Shelley, what do you feel about this one?
I think as we fight this war on corruption, I think for me it's two things that are very important to me as a lawyer. One is we must always remember that everyone is innocent, the presumption of innocence. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
And so when you're charged, you're actually being given an opportunity to be able to defend yourself, to either have yourself proved innocent or found to have been, you know, committed the offense as indicated. So it's very important that we go that way. Another issue that is of great concern to me as a lawyer is the fact that it seems the mood in the country is that the higher the bail terms, then the more that corruption is being fought. But that is not true, in fact. We must remind ourselves that bail is purely to ensure attendance by the accused person. That is all. So remember, securing attendance sometimes can be a surety by leaving your passports in court and saying, I will even report to the police station if I must every week. But it doesn't mean necessarily giving you a punitive cash terms. So I think it's very important. And people may think that that it's okay now because it's so-and-so, but I always tell people, just think about it. Suppose it was you. Wouldn't you want to get a bail terms that you can afford? And I think we need to put a check on that, because I think that bail terms are becoming extremely expensive, so but it's because it's playing to the gallery. The public want to hear that. But we must also remind the public that it is just to secure your attendance. As long as we are sure the person is not a flight risk and is not going to skip, then we must just give enough to give to provide
and
that.
To a layman, they might think it actually points to
it's
how
not
guilty.
A punishment. I think and I think I want you as the media, because we are confusing Kenyans, we must let them know that it is not a punishment. Because if it is then a punishment, then it means you've been found guilty even before you've been tried.
Then it would be a fine.
And we must protect people's rights so much, because it could be you tomorrow. You may think, I do remember in the past, I think it was the late Honorable Biwott, they were the ones who changed the law to say that you can be held for 14 days without an explanation. And I don't think they ever thought to themselves. And one day when he was a minister, he ended up being held for 14 days. And you see, So sometimes
After
what
pushing for it.
you wish upon other people, you must tell yourself, suppose it happened to me, would I like my rights to be protected? And lastly, again, on this issue of the fact that whether someone should remain in office or not remain in office, once they are charged, again, it is something we must become very careful as a country to look at, because, and that's why I'm very worried about the pronouncements by the court on certain issues that are so specific that cannot be done through a blanket order. So, for example, already in the public service, when there is a rule in the HR manual or the public service guidelines, when you are charged, you are interdicted and put on half salary, and you stay away from the office until, if you are found innocent after the end of your court case, you can be returned back and your money be refunded. But also, but it's different for every job. That's how we should look at it. And I think I still need to read this judgment in more detail, because you can't say anyone charged should be. There are certain positions where you don't exercise any executive authority, and therefore your remaining in office does not affect that that you won't interfere with those charges. But there are other jobs where you actually exercise executive authority. So in fact, I would have preferred the pronouncement. It should have been that they direct each of the government agencies, the public service, to come up with guidelines depending on the exact type of job.
Absolutely, and we'll be getting more into that in our next segment. Senator, just briefly on this one, what do you feel about the coverage of Kiambu Governor Fernand Waititu?
Yes, for me, the effort by the president to fight impunity and corruption should be supported. I say so because Kenya has had a very bad history when it comes to issues of corruption. We had instances where people are stealing billions of shillings, they are not being held accountable, and therefore we must ensure we support all those efforts. In regard to the ruling that was made by the judge, we need only to ascertain as to whether does it apply to each and every elected person or just governors. I say so because there's a major distinction between other elected leaders and people who hold executive offices. For me, to the best of my knowledge, there are only two positions that have executive authority, that of the presidency and that of the governor. And I think it makes sense for a person holding executive office to step aside by virtue of the huge mandate and the kind of work they do, their uniqueness, as opposed to a person who is part of what we call a collegiate body, like let's say a parliament or even a county assembly. Maybe that distinction needs to be done. And again also, I need to read the judgment of Mumbi to know whether that finding was what we call ratio decidendi, which is binding, or what we call obiter dictum. Obiter is where a judge just make some observations, but that does not really mean it is a final finding which can then have force of law. So we need to understand under what circumstances did the judge, for instance, invalidate the provisions of the statute or not. So once we're able to know that, I can comment with a lot of authority as to the legal effect of that finding. Be that as it may, I think there is some rationale in ensuring people don't go back to the office, they start interfering with witnesses. But of course, we must also respect rights which are established under the law, which of course must not be trampled on by...
But Senator, I think another important thing to add on your point, which is a very good point, is also, again, that is also when we communicate to Kenyans, we don't explain this. The finding should be based on what is sought at the court. So you may find that one had gone for certain specific orders, and then the judge pronounces on those specific orders, and then on the wayside, as he says, as obiter, the judge, goes on to explain a matter. And that is not a finding, but then you find that that now makes the headlines, then it confuses Kenyans completely. And lastly, if you just, I think this would be unfair if we don't say it. I mean, for all of us who support the president's fight against corruption, I like what the president did say in his State of the Nation address this year. He said, we do not want to undertake vigilante justice. He said those people must be taken to court. and they're innocent until proven guilty. And I think we should remain with that trajectory, because it's so fine to do it until it happens.